The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday, July 17th. I hope everybody is having a fantastic weekend, and I guess looking forward to the weekend. Having a fantastic week and looking forward to the weekend. I hope everybody is. Anyway, I see on the chat there's these the little crowns that you get. Like, I guess the more you participate in the chat, the more lucrative the crown. I don't know. Like, Robert right now has crown number 1. Ryan has crown number 2. And who's number 3? Lincoln is number 3. I have a feeling that this is going to incentivize lots of comments, whether they're of value or not. So lots of chats, whether they add value or not, right? So yeah, just break up all your chats into single words. Robert is number 1, but not if you continue to chat, Ryan. You might make it to number 1. There's a real competition going on now. This is good. More chat, higher on the algorithm. So this is good. I guess YouTube has introduced this feature to boost chatting. We want to have more chatting. Okay, let's jump into the news because you guys don't want to hear all this stuff. Let's start with. I was going to start with Gaza, but actually, let's start with this other story. I ran out of characters in terms of all the stories I wanted to cover today. So, the Labour Party in the UK has announced that starting from the next election, they are expanding the number of voters to include all those above the age of 16. So 16 will now become the official voting age in the United Kingdom, and thus the United Kingdom went from being a disaster to being a complete and utter basket case. I mean, that's insane. Giving 16-year-olds a vote? That's crazy. I mean, if anything, we should be increasing the voting age to like 21 or 25 or, I don't know, 35 or something like that. But 16? You want to give kids 16 a vote? Now, it is interesting to note. I mean, particularly boys, the frontal cortex is not developed. It doesn't fully develop until 21. What the hell do they know at 16? Oh, they have, but their emotional life is very well developed, which means we'll have politics now that are even more of an appeal to emotion than they have been in the past. I mean, note that this is the same Labour Party that has backed raising the age of consent from 16 to 18 for getting a tattoo, buying alcohol, watching porn, opening a bank account, purchasing cigarettes, using a sunbed, and being tried as an adult. So 16-year-olds in the UK are not adult enough to get a tattoo, buy alcohol, watch porn, open a bank account, purchase cigarettes, use a sunbed, or to be tried as an adult. They're not mature enough for any of those things. They're not rational decision makers enough for any of those things. But voting, why not? Now, I mean, there's a sense in which I appreciate that. In an ideal world, voting would not be that important. But we don't live in a frigging ideal world. We live in a rotten, mixed economy in which politicians have control and say about everything in our lives. And do we really want our teenagers running the show? God, this is one of the dumbest ideas ever. Again, I vote for raising the minimum voting age to 21. I don't think this is the case of the United States. I don't think the voting age should be any lower than the drinking age. If the drinking age in the United States is 21, most states, then the voting age should be 21. That's just my view. All right. Anyway, just thought you'd get a kick out of that. And one more nail in the coffin of the United Kingdom that was slowly deteriorating into. A couple of other quick ones before we get to the ones I've listed. This is kind of interesting. Zelensky's announced a mega deal with the United States. It seems like the United States is going to supply significant weaponry to Ukraine. And part of that, in exchange, Ukraine is going to supply the United States with drones, with large-scale purchases of Ukrainian drones. The Ukrainians have become world-class at producing drones and getting them into battlefield. I'm a little skeptical about this because one of the features of Ukrainian drones is, I think, at least the last I read, was that they use Chinese parts. I don't think they could produce drones at scale without Chinese parts. I think a requirement for American military drones is that they are not, they do not have any Chinese parts. So it's going to be interesting to see the details if and ever we see them. But there is this rumor that Ukraine is going to go into mass production of drones and sell them to the United States. All right, one other quick item. A couple of updates on Epstein, on Jeffrey Epstein. There is supposedly going to be there's an attempt to force a Senate vote. House of Representative vote, which would declare that, force the administration to release the Epstein files. Of course, this puts the Democrats are all going to vote for it. Not because they care, but because it embarrasses the Republicans. And the Republicans are going to be torn, but they're going to be probably enough Republicans to vote for it that it'll pass. That'll put even more political pressure on the White House to release these files. So Epstein is not going away, and it's certainly not going away the way Trump wants it to go away. So that's interesting. I also saw a video that is being released of a Fox interview that Trump did. I'm trying to see what the date of the Fox interview was. Maybe it was today. Anyway, I'm not sure. But this is an unedited version of the Fox interview where Trump is clear that unlike JFK and 9/11, he does not want to fully declassify Epstein material because he says there's fake stuff in there. Fake stuff in there. So this battle between Trump and MAGA over Jeffrey Epstein is not going away. Is not going away because there's obviously stuff there that's embarrassing to Trump one way or the other, or to people Trump is beholden to, one way or the other. And clearly Trump does not want to release this as a consequence. It's a problem. A problem for Trump and a problem for MAGA, and it's going to be really, really interesting with MAGA. One more. I want to do one more, and then we'll get to Syria. This relates to, maybe I have it later. Do I have it later? No. I have something else. All right. This relates to tariffs. There is this data coming out that says, I'll just read you what it says, right? The data coming out, and I just want to warn you all because this is another one of those data fallacies. They should really know what they're reporting about. Anyway, the input prices just came in way below expectations. I don't know whose expectations, but June was just 0.1% month over month, negative 0.2 year over year, while May saw a huge downward revision from flat to negative 0.4%. Still waiting for tariffs to be passed on by foreign producers. Now, if it were true that prices of imports to consumers had not changed, then you would say, wow, Trump is right. The tariffs are being eaten by foreign producers, right? The prices are not changing. But these are BLS numbers. BLS import price indices, explicitly, it's noted right there, do not include tariffs. So this chart actually, so the fact that prices have not gone, the fact that prices have stayed flat, right, and have not, it basically says, and have not gone down significantly, suggests that the people in China selling us stuff are getting exactly the same that they always did, and we are paying the tariffs. Do you get the difference? If these import prices that do not include tariffs stay flat, then you have to add tariffs on top of them to get the consumer price. So this shows you that foreign companies are not eating the tariff. So again, you'll see a lot of confusing info out there. One of our jobs here at the Yaron Brook Show is to debunk a lot of the nonsense that you'll hear out there. But, you'll hear a lot about these kind of things. Look, import prices went down a little bit, a tiny bit, insignificant as compared to 10% tariffs. So the fact that they only went down 0.4% means the 9.6% is all you're paying. You're paying that. Just no way around it. Tariffs are passed along to the consumer, or to at least an American. Maybe American companies are eating it. Maybe importers are eating it. But they can't eat a lot of it. Importers don't make that much money. All right, let's get to our list of news. Let's start with a quick Syria update. So, the Trump administration yesterday was quite upset with the Israelis intervening, and they put a lot of pressure on Syria. And what happened yesterday is the Syrians and the Druze, and if you don't know who the Druze are, I covered that all yesterday, have renewed what was a ceasefire. Syrian army has left the Druze area, has backed off of the Druze area, and retreated from their positions. The reality is that the Syrians cannot afford to piss off the Israelis. Israel can do more damage to Syria in a day than Syria can do damage to Israel in a year. And they know that. So they are, I don't know why they even started this, but they have basically retreated back to their previous positions. At the same time, there are still Islamist groups working in the areas affiliated with the Druze who are still trying to take villages, still attracting Druze populations. The Syrian regime is saying, it's not us, but fighting still continues, and the Israelis are engaged in fighting against these Sunni Islamist groups, tribes, in trying to protect the Druze in southern Syria. So fighting continues, but not between the Druze or Israel and the official Syrian military forces, if you want to call them that. I guess the Syrian regime has outsourced the killing of the Druze to some of the militias affiliated with them in the south. They're affiliated also with the Bedouins. Let's see. Yeah, hundreds of Jews were massacred. I talked about that yesterday. That was happening over the weekend. I will say top Jewish clerics have disavowed the New Deal. So even among the Jews, there is no agreement about the ceasefire vis-a-vis the Syrian army. But the Trump administration is pretty adamant about this and really putting a lot of pressure on Israel and on the Syrian government, I guess, about this. So that's an update on Syria. I wanted to give you a quick update on Gaza. Well, one thing that happened yesterday in Gaza is that fragments from an Israeli artillery shell landed and caused damage and injury to a number of people inside a church in Gaza. And of course, this upset the, Christian contingent of MAGA, and they, attacked Israel and made big deal about, with Trump about Israel's now killing Christians. They don't care, notice, that the Syrians are killing Christians. They didn't care when ISIS was killing Christians. They didn't care that much about killing Christians generally. It's when Israel kills Christians, really, they really flip out. Anyway, they made a big deal out of this. Trump picked up the phone today, called Netanyahu, chewed him out about bombing the church. Israel has come out with an apology. They didn't do it on purpose. It was an accident. They apologized, the whole thing. Anyway, that warranted a phone call from Donald Trump because certain people in his base were obviously ticked off. And then more broadly about Gaza, Israel is engaged in military operations in Gaza, has been, since the beginning of the war, but since the end of the last ceasefire. They now pretty much control, I'd say 75% of the territory in Gaza. The 25% they don't control that 25% is probably, most likely, where the hostages are being held and where Hamas is strongest. Israel is not going in there, although it's slowly inching its way in there, not out of fear of Hamas or worry about Hamas, but mostly out of fear for the hostages, mostly out of fear for the lives of the hostages. They worry that as they get closer to where the hostages are held, Hamas is more likely to kill them. In the meantime, there are still negotiations about a ceasefire. Israel seems or the Israeli government seems quite serious about achieving a ceasefire and releasing, I think the agreement would say that half the live hostages and maybe half the bodies of the dead hostages would be released. In exchange for a ceasefire, Israeli withdrawal from much of the 75% that they've taken, and some kind of guarantee that Israel will not start the war again 60 days later, although I don't know how Israel can guarantee that to anybody. So that's where the negotiations are going. Trump really wants a deal. He really wants a deal. I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of what the phone call was with Netanyahu today. There's a lot of pressure on getting the deal. Trump needs a victory here. Again, his Nobel Prize, but more importantly, his kind of reputation as he brings peace and no wars, with Trump in office. And he has a contingency within MAGA that's very anti-Israel. And as a consequence, he would like to get this deal done. So there's a lot of pressure on Israel to cut some kind of a deal with Hamas in kind of whatever it takes, if you will. All right. So that's the Gaza update. In the meantime, as I always tell you, it always needs to remember, there are soldiers putting themselves in harm's way. There's still a lot of death and destruction going on, and Hamas is inflicting huge amount of damage on its own civilian population. Yesterday there was a stampede at one of the aid centers, probably initiated by Hamas, and 20 people I think got killed by being trampled on by other people. Horrific way to die. But Hamas is doing everything it can to destabilize Gaza and to make Israel look as bad as possible. And that is their whole agenda. In the meantime, Israel is treading on very carefully, and as a consequence of treading very carefully, it is losing soldiers when they really shouldn't be. Right? Sad. So yesterday, Trump announced, the crucial and important news that is relevant to all of our lives, that he has, that Coca-Cola had agreed under his influence, pressure, arm twisting, however you want to call it, Coca-Cola has agreed to actually stop using corn syrup and replace using corn syrup with actual sugar, with cane sugar. Now, it's not clear that deal has actually happened. It's not clear that Coke is actually going to do this, but Trump did announce it. And of course, that brings up the question of why does Coca-Cola use corn syrup and not sugar? What drives that? And we've talked about this in the past, a long time ago. We've talked about it on a number of different shows, I think, because it's always a great story to illustrate the way pressure group politics, gang warfare happens in a mixed economy. Sugar prices in the United States are double global prices. So you could import sugar right now from other countries and import it at half the price that sugar is sold in the United States. Now, why is this? Well, first, it's to protect the sugar industry. Now, the sugar industry in the United States is not large, but it is very powerful politically. And it's not powerfully politically just because sugar. We'll get to that. It is based almost exclusively in Florida. So you could very much call Florida senators sugar senators. They always vote to keep the sugar tariff up so that, world sugar prices. This is a tariff that America has had forever. This is not a Trump tariff. This is a pre-Trump tariff where sugar prices are really, really, really high, double the world price. So sugar prices are held high because the sugar lobby lobbies for it. But you see, if it was just the sugar lobby, then it's too small to really matter. How many, 2 senators, a few congressmen from Florida would vote for it, but it's not enough to make that big of a difference. So what is it that drives the sugar tariff? Why do we have 100% sugar tariff? Who lobbies for it? Who is powerful that lobbies for it? Well, it turns out that the people who lobby for it are corn producers. Now you say, why do corn producers? Corn farmers. Now, corn farmers are very powerful politically. That Iowa primary, corn farmers dominate the Midwest. This is Republican territory, but it's also, there were a lot of congressmen from Democrats. There's just a lot of political sway in the heartland. Now, why do corn farmers care? Because sugar manufacturers in the United States cannot produce enough sugar to satisfy demand. And demand is not that high for sugar at the high prices. So who fills the gap? Well, corn syrup does. Corn syrup made from corn. Corn syrup can be sold at a lot lower price than sugar and still make a profit. So the corn industry has a huge incentive not to allow cheap sugar into America. If cheap sugar was allowed to come into America, corn would have to shrink. People would have to expend less resources on growing corn. Now, from an economic perspective, that would be amazing. That would be so good because it would be so much more efficient. The land would then be used to grow things that people actually value. Not that people value because they don't have any better alternative because the government keeps the alternative out. So all that land could be used for more productive means. And we'd have less corn syrup. And we'd all be drinking Coca-Cola with real sugar in it. And lots of other things would use sugar rather than corn syrup. So it's the corn industry, the corn lobby that really counts here, that's keeping sugar out. And corn lobby are all Trump voters. And I can't imagine that they are happy with Trump advocating for sugar and Coca-Cola. It takes their entire business away. What the hell? So, what? What is real sugar? Anyway, you could have real sugar in you could have cane sugar in your what do you call it? In your Coca-Cola, if only the United States would drop the tariff on sugar to zero and allow the importation of sugar into the United States. Lots of countries, Mexico, the Caribbean nations, would love to export cane sugar to the U.S. It's the corn lobby that prevents it. So just so we have that clear, and I don't see how Coca-Cola is going to change its policies. And Trump is in trouble with his constituencies in the Midwest if he actually forces them to do that, because that would take a lot of business from the corn lobby. Look, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I don't care what sugar you consume. I'm just saying that people constantly complain. MAGA and MAHA, stupid RFK, constantly complain about not having cane sugar. And I'm just explaining why we don't have cane sugar. I'm not saying there's a health benefit. Now, they claim there's a taste benefit, that cane sugar tastes better than corn syrup. So be it. I have no idea if there's any health benefit. I don't really care. Let the market decide about taste and all that. I'm just an advocate for getting rid of the stupid tariffs. And I'm trying to explain to you why it is, to begin with, that, that in America, we don't use cane sugar. We use corn syrup. It has nothing to do with taste. It has nothing to do with health. It has nothing to do with anything except lobbies, pressure groups, the gang warfare that is a mixed economy. And the mixed economy here we're talking about is, is the gangs of the sugar lobby and the corn lobby. Corn lobby being particularly nasty because they're so powerful. We also have ethanol. We use ethanol in our gasoline, which makes little sense. But again, feeds the corn lobby. It's all about corn. Bob Dole used to be called the ethanol senator. And the Florida senators should be called the sugar senators, and go on and on and on about the pressure groups that each senator abides by. All right, let's see. So yes, the Congress has done something good, and the Trump administration has done something good. The Senate actually advanced a bill that is going to claw back $9 billion worth of funding for foreign aid and for public broadcasting. It barely passed, so J.D. Vance had to come in to vote, so 51-50. Because Mitch McConnell, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, and Susan Collins of Maine opposed the measure. Now, part of the opposition was about foreign aid. In particular, there's a lot of concern about this program that provides AIDS medication in Africa, although I read yesterday that the White House had agreed to find another way to get that AIDS medication to Africa. But anyway, they cut $9 billion, yay, off of a multi-trillion-dollar budget. But they did cut, more importantly, they cut funding for PBS, NPR. I've been waiting for that to happen for a long, long, long time. I hope it sticks. I hope this passes the Senate. I hope the president signs it, and I hope they keep it, and don't they just bring it back in a few years. But the U.S. government should not be funding any media, no matter what their bias is. They shouldn't be funding any media. So that is a little bit of good news. And then on top of that, the Trump administration has also announced that they are pulling $4 billion from California for the high-speed rail project. So it says that they've determined the railroad authority did not live up to the terms that it agreed to in the initial federal contract. This doesn't surprise me. The high-speed rail in California has been an unmitigated disaster since day one. It's taken forever. It has massive cost overruns. The whole thing is just one big massive failure. In the letter, the government writes, after over a decade of failures in mismanagement and incompetence, have proven it cannot build its train to nowhere on time or on budget. It's time for this boondoggle to die. I agree. Privatize it. Let private entrepreneurs build it if anybody's going to build it. No response yet. But Gavin Newsom is probably going to sue. You're going to try to find a way to get the money out of the federal government anyway. But yeah, I mean, this is exactly, this is a disastrous project that should have never been built. The current iteration of the project projects a cost of $22 billion. $22 billion. We're not talking about connecting LA to San Francisco. That would be a pretty cool project. We're talking about connecting to, Bakersfield and somewhere else. I mean, two insignificant towns in the Central Valley. It's stage one to one day maybe connecting it all from San Francisco to LA. And this is just this first step of this is going to cost $22 billion. That is insane. So good for the Trump administration for backing off and not funding this boondoggle anymore. It's a disgrace. And I wish they just said no more funding of infrastructure, of state infrastructure. We'll fund federal infrastructure because we have to, kind of by law. But no more funding of state infrastructure. States that want to fund infrastructure, you do it by yourselves. Federal government is not going to participate. And then we can do more. All right, I just remind you guys that I do answer questions. You can ask anything you want. There is a super chat. We try to use the super chat to raise money for the show, $250 for every hour that I broadcast. It's kind of a minimum rate. This show is funded by listeners like you, so please consider over the next few minutes to ask a question, support with a sticker. But the questions is nice because you dictate the show. You kind of shape the show. You determine what I will talk about. And, of course, the length of the show, which is going to be pretty short today because we have very, very few questions. So if you want to ask more questions, now is the time to do it. Otherwise, we'll run out of time. All right. Batteries, yes. So it turns out the U.S. is set to impose 93.5% tariffs on graphite. I think it's graphite. Yeah, graphite that it imports from China. Graphite, of course, is a key battery component. And the U.S. Commerce Department has come to the conclusion that graphite production in China is unfairly subsidized, and that Chinese companies are violating anti-dumping laws. Now, these new duties are going to add to existing rates, making the effective tariff 160%. 160%. Right? Now, think about that. Basically, what it says is if you want to build a battery in the United States, you're going to have to import graphite from somewhere other than China. And China was giving you a deal because they're subsidizing it. Maybe they've been selling it below cost. So if you're a U.S. manufacturer, isn't that amazing that you can get graphite so cheaply, and therefore doesn't it benefit your doesn't it benefit dramatically your ability to build batteries cheaply? Isn't, China dumping graphite in the United States a good thing, not a bad thing? Now, what's going to happen to battery manufacturers in the United States? And the United States is trying to become independent of China in producing batteries. Where are they going to get the graphite from? Well, it's going to be very difficult, to get it. Maybe you can get it. Maybe there's some sources in the United States. Okay, but they're going to be more expensive than the Chinese sources. So, again, your batteries are going to be more expensive than Chinese batteries. Your batteries are going to be more expensive than Korean batteries, Japanese batteries. All batteries that are benefiting from the fact that they're buying cheap graphite from China. Now, of course, the Tesla, who actually needs batteries, cheap batteries, was fighting to block this tariff. Panasonic and other key battery suppliers, people who build batteries, were trying to block the tariff. What is gained by this? I mean, if other countries want to subsidize their batteries, why should we care? We should embrace it. We should buy their cheap stuff and make cheap batteries as a consequence. Now remember, and it's not like there are multiple huge, cheap suppliers of graphite elsewhere. China dominates the processing of graphite. So where exactly are they going to get graphite instead from? I mean, this kind of stuff that Trump is doing is just mindless. It's so stupid. No upside, lots of downside. A real damage to American industry. Damage to Tesla, who is losing market share, dramatically to the Chinese car manufacturers. Damage to whoever wants to build batteries in the United States is not going to be crippled. And again, batteries are could be viewed as strategic for drones, for national defense. But no, we don't want cheap graphite from China. God forbid. No cheap graphite from China. That would be horrific, right? It's like this administration really does want to shoot ourselves in the knee. I mean, maybe they know of a massive graphite find in the United States. Maybe they're in on an investment in a graphite company, to process graphites in the United States. But that will take years before anybody will process graphites in the United States. And so why not wait with the tariff until we can actually process the graphite ourselves? If you're thinking even in those terms, which are not the terms to think in, but if you are, it just makes no sense. Instead, we'll just pay 160% tax in order to continue to buy graphite from China, and which will make America dramatically less competitive. I mean, America's been doing, certainly in comparison to other countries, America's been doing fantastically well in the era of free trade. And it's been doing well primarily because of the free trade. Once you start crippling yourself with barriers to trade, you know, America's not going to do as well. It's just not going to do as well. It's going to do a lot worse. A lot worse. Trade is win-win. It only benefits America. You know, all these trade deals, all these getting subsidized stuff from China, all this stuff has only benefited America. I've had now 2 economists on last week and earlier this week, you know, articulating this in detail. The middle class is stronger, the America is richer, wages have gone up across the entire spectrum to a large extent because we allow for trade and because we benefit from cheap stuff the Chinese choose to dump in the United States. It's unbelievable that anybody can believe the case against trade. Now, you could argue against trade with China for national security reasons. But even there, you have to do it smart. You have to think about how to do it properly. And by the way, for national security reasons, if that's the concern of the Trump administration, then why did he approve 2 days ago, 3 days ago, why did he approve for NVIDIA to sell the Chinese, you know, their AI chips, when previously they were banned from selling them to the Chinese? It's just, there's no strategy, there's no policy, there's no thought. It's shooting from the hip. There's no strategy in terms of how to confront China and how to reduce the threat that China poses to the United States, assuming it poses a threat. None. On the contrary, we are crippling ourselves. We're making it more difficult for us to compete with China. And this is a good example. The graphite is a great example of how we're making it harder for us to compete with China. Of course, China is not going to be happy with it because we're going to be importing less graphite. They want to export more graphite to us. So they're not happy about it. But I tell you who's more unhappy about it: Tesla and Panasonic and other people who make batteries. Trump shouldn't have to weigh concerns about anything. Trump shouldn't be involved in making decisions about trade. It's not the job of government. Not a job of government. You know, figure out what the national security needs, set that, and forget about everything else. And government should not be involved in trade. Zero, zilch, nada. Get out of the way. That's the role of government in trade. Unilateral, zero tariffs. All right. You know, it rained a lot earlier this week in New York City. A lot of rain. A lot of rain. And it turns out that the flood waters, the water from all the rain, cascaded into the subway stations. There were geysers of sewage eruptions in front of passengers all over the terminals in New York. Just looked disgusting and horrible. Now, it rains in New York. Rain is not unusual. And indeed, New York once in a while gets a hurricane and sea level rises and you can get flooding. And the subways are just not built to deal with it. A massive investment needs to be made in the New York subways in order to, you know, just kind of improve the infrastructure to be able to deal with rain. And with you know, with rising sea levels in storms and things like that. And ultimately, if there is such a thing as rising sea levels that can affect New York, building dikes or other mechanisms by which to control the rise in sea level. that needs to all happen. So we need a massive infrastructure investment. Now, how do you do that? I mean, the city doesn't have the money to do it. And the fact is the subway system is owned by the state. And, we've got our socialist candidate for mayor in New York. We've got a socialist candidate for mayor in New York who is now basically wants to make the subway free. And by the way, to house the homeless in the subway so that they can get the sewage and they can get flooded, I guess. And I didn't know this because I don't use the subway anymore. I'm in New York. But the subway is really, really, really cheap. Basically, a ride costs $2.90, which is less than an average cup of coffee in New York. I mean, the solution to fixing the infrastructure in a subway is to make it a lot more expensive. It would also solve the crowding problem, solve a lot of problems. But now you'd actually run a profit. Right now, the MTA, the Transit Authority, is facing a $30 billion budget shortfall. They need a $30 billion surplus so they can handle infrastructure problems. So what if we raise the price to, I don't know, $6? And then use the profits, hopefully they can get a profit at $6, to actually start improving the infrastructure of the rail system. So, ideally, they would just privatize the system, and then privatized system would figure out which lines are profitable, which are not, what the rate should be. There'd be variable rates based on different times of day, right? Rush hour would be higher rate than normal times. And then they'd issue bonds, they'd issue debt in order to make the significant investment in the infrastructure that they need to make. So, yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice? All right, let's move to a couple of good stories. As always, good stories are always stories about technology. That's the only positive thing really happening in our world today. We did see spending cuts, so that was good. Small, $9 billion, $4 billion for the train. Nothing really that exciting, but pretty small. Anyway, it turns out that there's a massive technological revolution going on right now on American farms. Now, it's already been true for a while that, farms were using GPS-guided tractors and digital technology like farm management software systems and even some satellite technology to assess, the condition of land and things like that. But we're talking next generation now. We're talking about tractors that have arrays of sensors, cameras, and AI software that can drive through a field autonomously without a driver, constantly deciding where and when to spray fertilizer or whack weeds, where to do all the things that I have no idea what they mean, that farmers actually do. AI can now give on-the-spot evaluation of the soil quality, the existence of weeds, anything that needs to happen. And it's all being done without human interference. That is, these tractors don't need a driver. Other farm equipment does not need drivers anymore. They're guided by GPS systems, and they're guided by this artificial intelligence in terms of what they are doing. It really is going to be really, really sad that, farm employment in the United States is going to go down again. America is going to lose more farm jobs to technology. It's really tragic. Fewer people will be able to make a living farming. And those people will have to find other jobs. This is what technology does. I'm kidding. It's not sad at all. It's amazing. People are being liberated from the chores of farming, from the physical labor that's associated with it, and from just the inhumanity of having to live in the middle of nowhere on a farm. So they're liberated now to the people who really want to do it and use all this cool technology can stay, and the rest of them can go to the city and actually have a life. So, but you will see, the farm lobby will join with the manufacturing lobby to decry the massive loss of jobs, to fill in the blank, whoever they decide are the bad guys. But it's a beautiful thing to see how technology is really changing the world and changing professions and changing the way people do business. In Florida, there is now a program. I mean, fortunately, it's a government-funded program, but still, it's still, I think, a positive program. A program it's under the Sunshine Genetics Act, which is funding free whole genome sequencing for Florida babies whose parents so choose. So when your baby, is born, you get to sign a form, and they can sequence the entire genome of the baby. Now, this has so many benefits. This should be something that is offered all parents. It's not that expensive anymore, so people should just pay for it. I don't think the state needs to be involved, and maybe some biotech companies would be willing to actually fund this for the data. But this kind of testing allows for very early detection of thousands of rare diseases where the prognosis, the outcome of the disease greatly improves with early treatment. It's, of course, a great way to do science, to use this to be able to see, genes versus outcomes and different treatments and follow these people across life. Really cool, I think, that this is happening in Florida. It's not cool it's free. It's not cool it's state funded. I don't like the idea that it's state funded. But this idea that parents should be able to sign a document and get their baby's genome done. Again, it's a little bit of blood. It's a prick of a finger. It's not any kind of procedure that has to happen. And so cool that we're going to have databases with all of this information. And, kids are going to be able to find out if they have any issues that they need to be treated on very, very early. It's going to save a lot of lives, both the data and just the specifics for these particular individuals. So these tech innovations are significant, dramatic. If we still are free in the years and decades to come, we will all benefit dramatically from this. Who now has the phone? Who is number one in terms of participation in the chat? I can see who's number two. That's Lincoln. But who's number one? Oh, I can click on it, and I get a thing. Oh, wow. Stephanie is number one. Lincoln is number two, and Ollie is number three. Huh. And I don't know over what period of time this is. I don't know if this is just today or Stephanie B is number one. She's the top fan, according to this. Oh, maybe because she put the money down. Maybe it takes into account money. I think it takes into account money. Yeah. So Stephanie right now has the top spot because she did 20 euros. You guys can get the top spot if you outbid Stephanie. So it's not just how much you participate in the chat. It's an algorithm. It takes into account your chat participation, but more importantly, it takes into account how many dollars you do in the super chat. So got a little competition now going on. Can anybody beat Stephanie for the #1 crown as top fan based on today? How many points did she have? Top fan? 1,200 points. 1,200 points. Lincoln has 900. Ollie has 700. My guess is Ollie, it's also based, and Lincoln, it's based on a combination of the fact that he did a super chat and he is making comments. Kind of interesting. All right, guys. Reminder, we are only about halfway to our goal for the first hour. So reminder for you to ask questions, get involved, get engaged, and contribute to the show, funded with the support of you guys. Ali is my friend from London. Yes, I do remember you. All right, Mary Aline, thank you for the sticker. Richard, thank you for the sticker. Lincoln, thank you for the sticker. Mark, thank you for the sticker. Anonymous user, thank you for the sticker. Paul Cohen, and I think I saw Jonathan Honing, thank you. And then we had an anonymous user, and then we got it all started with Robert Naser, who started us off with a sticker, and that's why he had the crown for a while, because he did a sticker with some money, and he was a huge participant in the chat. All right. John, thanks for the sticker. I appreciate this. Again, remember, it's your support that makes this show possible. And you could show that support either here through a super chat or sticker, or you could also do it by going to Patreon, patreon.com. Just search Yaron Brook Show and become a monthly supporter of the Yaron Brook Show. That is greatly appreciated if you value these new shows and the other shows that I do. Stephanie asks, I wonder if Ayn Rand or Yaron Brook have an opinion about nudism and women going topless on beaches. I think it's not civilized, but I'm not sure how to explain it or if it makes sense. Could you talk about that? Great topic, Stephanie. I don't know what Ayn Rand would think of it. I suspect Ayn Rand might agree with you. But I have to say that Leonard Peikoff would not. I definitely remember a Q&A. Maybe it was during a talk, or maybe it was during a Q&A in 1987 at the Thomas Jefferson School, which was held at the University of San Diego, University of San Diego in La Jolla. And the University of San Diego, La Jolla, actually sits right above Black's Beach. And Black's Beach is a famous nudist beach in San Diego. And Leonard actually expressed his support for being nude at the beach if you had a reasonably nice body to show. That is, I think that if there was a aesthetic value, he was in support of it. And, I generally agree with that. I don't see why going topless is uncivilized. I don't see the problem in it. I don't see the problem in nudity generally in a beach setting, in something like a beach setting. I don't see the issue with it. I think we have, in our Christian-based society, way too many hang-ups around our body and around nudity. And so, I have no problem with nude beaches. I certainly don't consider them uncivilized. I think people are going to have different preferences. But I do think a lot of the, unease people have in particularly in the United States, more so than in Europe, although Stephanie is writing from Europe because she's at least contributing in euros, is associated with a Christian upbringing that basically encourages us to feel a certain level of shame in our bodies and with nudity and sex. And I think our attitudes in our culture towards sex and towards nudity are very much shaped by kind of a Christian view, sadly. And I think that really hampers us. I think that's really crippling. So Ayn Rand probably would have agreed with you. Leonard, at least based on my memory, and I probably disagree with you. I just don't see, if you have nice breasts, if you have a nice body, why you would not want to be topless on a beach. What exactly is the bikini hiding, I guess I would say, right? Now, again, it depends on the level of comfort one has with one's own body and everything else. So it's not like you have to go. It's not like if you don't like being nude on the beach, you're somehow repressed or Christianity has imposed itself on you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you should really think about our attitudes fresh about these kind of issues. Fresh, try to separate them from kind of a repressed Christian upbringing. And I've never had a problem with it. Sunburn is a problem, but there is a modern scientific invention called sunscreen that takes care of that. So, and the sunburn issue applies more so, I think, to your back and neck, which is far more surface skin area than to other parts of your body. Colleen, if I'm wrong, let me know. Anyway, when I was young, and I won't complete that sentence, what are we doing now? Next question. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for the support. Thanks for the question, even if we disagree on this one. Hopefully you are taking it in stride. Clark, is the Enlightenment stronger in Europe than the US in some dimensions? Western European kids seem more mature, polite, articulate, intellectual, and overall more rational than American youth. Yeah, I don't know if that's right. I mean, European youth is far more leftist, far more socialist, I think, even than American youth, and American youth is already quite a bit. I don't know if that's true. They're better educated. So education is better in Europe, I think, because they never had Dewey. They never had progressive education kind of dominate education in Europe like it did in the United States. I think they're more mature, partially because of that, but also because, at least depending on where in Europe, also because to some extent they are poorer. I think that in America, our wealth has been used destructively to spoil our children and to prevent them from maturing. But there's plenty of immaturity in Europe as well. It's hard to tell if they're more articulate. The Brits sound more articulate, but that's mainly because they have a better accent. I think that the Enlightenment, the sense in which the Enlightenment is more prevalent in Europe, is that they were atheists. They rejected religion more thoroughly. That part of the Enlightenment, the advocacy of reason through and through, and the rejection of religion was never embraced in America significantly. And religion is a much more powerful force in American society. And I think that is part of why, American youth maybe is less mature. Religion makes you less mature. But I just think that's the only sense in which Europe is more Enlightenment-oriented in terms of freedom, individual liberty, in terms of individualism, in terms of love of science and technology. U.S. is way ahead of Europe. Hopper Campbell, altruism is a philosophy for oh, Wes, thank you for the $50. Really, really appreciate it. Esoteric Dichotomy, thank you guys. Hopper Campbell, altruism is a philosophy for losers. It's amazing how strongly held it is, even by people who have won in life. Yeah, look, it's the only option people have been presented with. Morality equals altruism. That just dominates how they're taught, what they learn in philosophy, what they learn from their preachers, what they learn from their mothers. Luckily, Americans don't take it too seriously, and particularly the ones who do well in life, but they still hold it as some kind of ideal. I like numbers. Does the war on Islamism matter to immigration? Yes. If you actually have a war on Islamism, you don't let them into your country. If you actually understand you're at war and you define that war and you declare that war, then you've got every legitimacy and every ability to then restrict their immigration. And how you want to define Islamism and who does it cover and everything, that can be debated, right? But if you start with, they are an enemy, they need to be fought at home and abroad, then your whole attitude towards Islamists who are your neighbors changes. They now become the enemy and they need to be taken care of. And part of that could be deportation, restricting their ability to immigrate, and part of that is going to where they live overseas and destroying them. Lincoln, Yaron, what is your thoughts on current AI tech valuations? AI is an amazing tech, but these funding rounds value these companies at level that seem too high, in my opinion. Look, they definitely seem high. They probably are high. It reminds me of the dot-com bubble, although it's narrow, of course. But the reality is that we don't know who the winners or who the losers are. This is a one way that it's, one way that we see, capital flowing to AI, and we want that. That's good. So, beware if you're investing. But I wouldn't be surprised if at the end, if the bubble bursts, if it is a bubble, if valuations come back to earth and some of the companies go bust, that in the end, more value would have been created than would have been lost, in spite of all of that. So on net, it is a positive thing, but in terms of an investment thesis, it's hard to tell. But it does seem rich, particularly when you see more models coming out of China. There's another AI coming out of China now that is significantly cheaper to run, significantly cheaper to train, and yet are the equals of the American models. And what that ultimately suggests is that this is going to be an incredibly competitive market, that there's no reason to believe just one firm will dominate. And if there is one firm that dominates, you probably don't know which firm it is now. And it might be that a lot of companies, even though it's a great tech, they never make any money at the tech because there's so much competition. It drives profits out. And yet they're heavily, heavily investing in infrastructure, data centers primarily. It's going to be a tough business from an investment perspective. Richard, when the U.S. had a draft, people argued that if you had to fight for your country at age 18, you should be able to vote at 18. Would you advocate voting at 18 if we had a draft? Yeah, I think so. I would even advocate voting at 18 if you're enlisting people at 18, if that's your enlistment age. I think the enlistment age should ultimately drive your voting age. I mean, it's a little ridiculous to expect somebody to go fight if they can't vote. But then I'd lower the drinking age. It's a little ridiculous to expect somebody to go fight but not trust them to drink. Ollie, with high taxation and crime rates in New York City and Silicon Valley comparative to the UAE, why are those locations continuing the financial services and innovative capitals of the world? Well, because first of all, because they're much, much better places to live. I mean, Silicon Valley has a very low crime rate. I mean, maybe San Francisco has a slightly higher one, but Silicon Valley itself has a very low crime rate. It's an amazing place to live. It's cultured, it's civilized. That you have in your vicinity some of the best universities in the world. You have a massive network effect that because the companies are already there and they employ people. New York City, in spite of everything you hear, is a relatively safe place. It's safer than it was a few years ago, and it's safer than it's been in a long time. New York City is relatively safe. And you just have to be careful. But New York City has the advantage of being a big city, civilized and cultured. You can't say that about the UAE. The UAE is a kind of there's a certain fakeness to the UAE. There's no culture in the UAE. Everybody who's there is there basically around the taxes. And the actual citizens of the UAE, remember, it's a authoritarian state run by a sheikh, who the citizens themselves are not particularly people who are participants in the Western civilization. Maybe they're trying, maybe not, hard to tell. You still wouldn't be a woman born in the UAE, although it's better now than it was 20 years ago. It's just, God, I would never want to live in the UAE, and I would in a heartbeat live in Silicon Valley and New York City. And crime rate is only one factor you factor into where you want to live. And just think of your job opportunities, given the networking effect, given the kind of people you're going to meet. In Silicon Valley, even in San Francisco, you're constantly meeting founders of companies, AI engineers, people who are dreaming big dreams, people who are really, really smart. I mean, living in Silicon Valley and in New York, I don't think it's like living anywhere else in the world in terms of the number of talented people that you meet on a daily basis. And ambitious people, you know, who want to do great things. And that quality of life, you can't match yet in the UAE. Samuel says, you mentioned previously, I believe, that ideally there would be no central bank. Would inflation or deflation ever happen in that case? Or if so, under what conditions? What is the ideal system? Yeah, an ideal system, look, we came close to ideal system in a number of different countries in the 19th century. We had a free banking gold standard where there was no central bank, and inflation was basically zero. There were periods in which prices went down a little bit. There were periods in which prices went up a little bit. But on average, over long periods of time, it all balanced out and inflation was basically zero. And I think that is the ideal system. The introduction of new money is predictable, or at least somewhat predictable. Productivity increases. Productivity drives down prices. Increased in the availability of money increases prices. They wash each other out. Pretty damn well. The historical evidence suggests that basically there's no inflation or deflation that's significant. And the deflation that happens is a slow decline in prices that is not particularly harmful. Not harmful at all, sorry. It's actually beneficial. Hakon, Yaron, I was introduced to you in an introductory ethics philosophy class when I compared your beliefs with Nozick's. Who compared my beliefs with Nozick's? How were you introduced to a class where you, I don't know if the grammar there is right. I've been watching your show ever since. Thank you for the great content. I'm curious who actually did the comparing of my beliefs with Nozick and how whoever it was got to it. But I'm super happy that you discovered this show and you discovered me and that somebody somewhere is using my content in an introductory ethics philosophy class. That makes my day. So thank you. All right, guys. Thank you. Really appreciate the super chatters and the stickers. Thanks, guys. I will see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow show will be at 4:30 in the afternoon. 4:30. See you there. Have a great rest of your week. Great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.